Welcome, everybody, to another rendition of the Lone Wolf Show. This is www.witchcrafttv.online. We are fair representation for all pagan, witch, and magic paths. And today we have a special guest, Mr. Oberon Zell, who has been coined, I would say, the father of what is now contemporary paganism. And we are going to be talking about some issues, particularly with the propaganda of 2025 and how it is harmful to the pagan community and marginalized communities and minority communities. Would you say that's all correct, Mr. Zell? And how are you? And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much, Lone Wolf. Yes, I think that's a fair summation of the situation. It's devastating. I'm sure that many of your viewers have been following the news with alarm, so we can talk about that tonight.
Right. Particularly like the in America, we just had some political shifting, and I know that a lot of people in our and our I would say assume pagan community in that nature are just we're kind of all on the same page, which is really good. I really like that idea, and I know that politics can be like really divisive, um, but I also feel like everything has two opposing forces. Would you agree with that? And what can what can we do as pagans, as magic folks, as or just earthly people? What can we do to combat this? I mean, because the propaganda of 2025 does press upon our religious freedoms. Is that correct?
Well, it does indeed. When you talk about two opposing forces, I always note that, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow, and that seems to be the case. In this case, it seems to be a pretty clear dichotomy going on for sure. What we have is the rise of a force that has been motivated and dominated for most of the past century by a force that most people don't really talk about much, which is Christian nationalism.
Hmm.
And the root of all this and the underlying motivation behind the entire Republican Party and the and MAGA situation and all the rest of it has been this effort by a very fundamentalist religious movement. Christian dominionism is what their name is for it, but there's various other names to turn this country into a theocracy. That's their agenda, and that's what they really want to do. They don't want to have a democracy, and they don't want to have a secular country. They want to have a religious theocracy that is run according to Old Testament law. It's pretty devastating, and it sees all the rest of the stuff is really a reflection of that, and various blueprints, like of course, like the Project 2025, lays out um, a set of procedures by which this may be undertaken. But that's really what's going on behind the scenes.
Can you tell me what a theocracy is? Um, some of the wordplay are like, what to me, like I don't know what that means. Because I'm still learning, and um, you're pretty adept, with a lot of your thinking and all that kind of stuff. Can you bring it down a few notches and explain it more layman so our viewers can understand it? Like, what is it a theocracy? What is that?
Surely. The crassy part of it is rulership. Democracy is ruled by the people, for example.
Mhm.
Oligarchy is rulership by the rich. And a theocracy is ruled by religion. And that's what it means, as in theology. Yeah, it means God. It means a state that is run by God as interpreted by a particular uh, church.
So
In
the
this
Vatican.
particular case, that's exactly. In this case, it's basically the Southern Baptist Convention, to be very specific, or the
Mhm.
evangelical movement, as they call it. Um, it's been going on directly since the 1960s rise of this, but it's always been an undercurrent. It goes clear back, for example, to the Puritans that were founding parts of this country, and the obvious reflection of that came out in the Salem witch trials. It's the
Right.
same kind of thinking, the same kind of attitude. It's the foundation of monotheism, the one
Yeah.
true right and only way that these people believe in. And that has been a conflict that's been going on for thousands of years
Yeah.
between a multiplicity, the plurality, and uh, polytheism, as it were, the idea that there are many ways, many paths, many gods, and it's all okay. That diversity is a good thing, versus this monarchy, monotheism, um, mono everything, really. As Isaac Bonewich used to say, um, we have monotheism and monarchy and monoculture and monogamy and monotony, and he would lay it all like that. But it's all about people who believe that they have the one true right and only way. And
Right.
if you have that, then everything else is wrong by definition, because
Hmm.
yours is the right one. So everything else is wrong. And if it's wrong, well, then all that wrong stuff has to be eradicated or punished or in some way dealt away with. And so that's what's been it's been the basis of all the holy wars. It's been the basis of the inquisitions and the witch burnings and and everything, and it's still reflected in our modern world. The three great monotheistic religions have been duking it out now for a couple of thousand years.
So
With
Christianity, Islam. What's the third one?
Judaism. That was the
Judy.
start
Okay,
of
yeah,
it
that
all.
makes sense. That
It
makes
all
sense.
began, it all began with Moses and the Ten Commandments, really.
Right.
Um, the idea that thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now, these statements were made in a time of when most of the people in the world were polytheists and had many gods, and it was okay. You'd come into your city and you'd have temples set up for the gods of Egypt and Greece and Rome, and they'd all be in the same town, and everybody would go to wherever where they wanted to, and it was fine. It was like going to different restaurants for dinner.
Hmm.
You could have the Chinese restaurant and the Italian restaurant and the Southern fried cooking all in the same neighborhood, and it's all right. And that's the way it used to be with churches and religions. But
Hmm.
that all changed when Christianity rose to it. Judaism didn't was pretty bad in its early days, but over time they kind of diminished their influence. But in the early days, if you read the Bible, they were pretty horrific. They simply moved into areas and murdered everybody. The very
Right.
first act of the Bible in the when the Ten Commandments were done. They make all these movies about Moses and the Ten Commandments, and you've seen them, I'm sure. And it always ends with Moses standing there holding the tablets up and all, and that's the end of the movie, and the credits roll. But they don't often tell what happened next. And what
Right.
happens next, if you read the Bible, is that Moses says, "Okay, these are the rules. Everybody who agrees to follow these, come over here." And he draws a line in the sand. And nobody goes except one tribe, the tribe of Levites.
Hmm.
And this is very important, the tribe of Levites. So they come over and they say, "Yeah, we want to join you. We're going to do this. We're going to follow these rules and follow your new religion and your new God." All the other people say, "No, thanks. We really appreciate your getting us out of Egypt, but we want to go off and raise our sheep and start our families, and we don't want to join your cult." So Moses says to the Levites, he says, "Okay, well then take out your swords and go back through the camp and quarter the camp and kill every man, his companion and his brother, and the people who walk beside him."
Yeah, that's
And
not
don't they
okay.
and they could have said, "Wait a minute, wasn't one of these rules thou shalt not kill?" But they don't. They don't. According to the Bible, they say, "Okay," and they go back through the camp and they slaughter a quarter of the people who came along with them. And it says in the Bible, it says that that evening the sands ran red with blood. And they come back and they say, "Okay, boss, we did like you asked. We killed all those people." This is the
Right.
first recorded religious genocide ever
Hmm.
recorded. There were lots of wars and conquests, but this is the first time that a mass slaughter of people was done on a religious basis.
Hmm.
And so Moses then says, "Well, because you have followed these rules and done what I said, you have now earned investiture. You are now the priests of Yahweh." And from that moment forward, the priesthood of Yahweh have been the Levites. And these are the people who wrote all the rules and they ran the temples and they became the priesthood. And that's how the religion began. And the rest of the Bible follows that all out as they, um, in the laws in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, half of them are about how to conduct animal sacrifice and slaughters and give all the
Right.
meat to the priests, that kind of stuff. And if anybody argues with you, you're supposed to stone them to death. That's also part of it. Really pretty horrible stuff. But eventually, they kind of diminished in influence. And by the time of the Roman conquest, they were just kind of a small little backwater area of a nut job.
Hmm.
And then under Rome, the people of Palestine and Israel and all that were so unhappy with the Roman occupation that there were various little sects rising up in protest and wanting to overthrow the Romans and like that. And the best way to see that really is with the Monty Python movie Life of Brian. That's probably the most accurate historical example of what was actually going on at that time.
Hmm.
And Christianity came out of that, which wouldn't have been much of a deal, except that in 70, the year 70, the Romans came in and squashed the whole place like a bug. They destroyed Jerusalem and leveled the temple because there had been one too many revolt and they were just sick of it. So that's what happened, and all of the rest of it was pretty much eradicated. And the Jews were dispersed in the great diaspora, and Christianity rose to become the dominant religion of the Roman
Right.
Empire. And from that point on, the whole plan had been to subjugate the entire world to this religion. And popes were the same as emperors, and they ruled for life, and they set out to dominate and control the entire world, which they managed to do pretty successfully in the Western world. In the Eastern world, something similar happened with Buddhism as it moved into Tibet and China, but we won't get into Buddhism because it got better. But Christianity did not. It continued to oppress everybody else who disagreed with them, and it's still active today doing the same thing. Now, that's not to say all Christians. There are many perfectly lovely Christian sects. There's the Unitarians and there's the Quakers and various liberal congregations like the Congregationalists and so on. Very many perfectly nice, wonderful people. But this radical core, the
Hmm.
Puritan, Calvinist, and now Southern Baptist Convention core, has always wanted to rule the world. And
Right.
that's how you tell in any story who the villain is. The villain always has the same agenda. They want to rule the world, you know. And we see that with the rise of
Oh, wow.
these powerful dictators, like Hitler and Stalin, and now Putin and Kim Jong Un, and all these various ones that Trump admires and wants to be one of them. He thinks that these are good, strong rulers, and that's what he wants. He doesn't want to be a president. He wants to be a king. He wants to be
Right.
an emperor. So that's basically the background.
So, I mean, you mentioned, the elements of like genocide, and, in history, there's all kinds of like fighting with this particular religious faith against this faith, and they kill each other, and it's like, because they believe that, that they're doing worshiping, the creator the right way. And now that the political shifting, and we have like these Christian white nationalists, they become oppressive to things like, the revival of contemporary witchcraft, things like, um, the revival of contemporary paganism, and etc. So, I mean, at the end of the day, is it possible that if that particular political shifting comes into power, will our community be a lot more oppressed? And if we do become more oppressed, what can we do to alleviate that? I mean, is that the trajectory that we're on right now?
Yes, it is precisely the trajectory that we're on. We came so close. We was just within 1.1% of the voting public. And and it wasn't even all the voters. Over a third of the eligible voters did not bother to go to the polls and vote in the last election. They just didn't bother, you know. And it was 39% of them, the ones who did vote, voted for Trump. and 38% of them voted for Kamala Harris. It was that
Right.
close, just 1% off, 1.5% to be exact. And we were right on the threshold of a positive future. Everything would have been great and groovy, and we would have gotten through. But oh no, it went the other way. And for whatever reasons, and everybody had reasons, although the reason that was most commonly stated by the serious Trump supporters was this: they said he hates the same people that I hate. And we're talking about hate-based religion and a hate-based culture. And Trump drummed up that hate. He got everybody hating each other, and that's what they voted on. They voted on the basis of what they hate. And these people, they're like the Daleks of Doctor Who. They hate everything that isn't them, and they always have. That's a Puritan
Yeah.
streak in them, you know. And we are definitely not like them, you know. It's very disturbing. But what can we do? That's the real answer, the real question,
Yeah.
and we
What
really
can you
have
do?
to be looking at that. So to address these issues, I kind of instigated. It was inspired by the incredibly beautiful sermon that Bishop Buddy gave at the inaugural service right following the election on that Sunday morning, and I'm sure you've all heard of it. It was a beautiful thing. She advocated that the Christian values of compassion and mercy um, should be adopted in dealing with these with the people now that he was in charge. And it was a very Christian thing by the traditional standards of the teachings of Jesus, you know. But
Hmm.
but Trump and his people took great offense because that's not the agenda that they have. They do not want to promote love and mercy and peace and justice for all and all that stuff. They want to punish people for not being them. So I kind of generated a statement of support for Bishop Buddy, saying that, well, we pagans, we join with other religions in standing in support of this very brave Episcopal bishop,
Hmm.
and she had the courage to stand up against an evil agenda, an evil dictator who had told everybody he was going to be a dictator on day one, which he definitely lived up to that promise. Well, I circulated this petition among other pagan groups, and people signed it. Lots of people signed it, and we got about 50 signatures of individuals and groups. And out of that, um, I started reaching out to the wider pagan community. Now, I've been around for over 60 years in the pagan
Hmm.
community, and the founder of some of the very first movements of the first legal pagan church. I founded the Church of All Worlds, the first one to get legally incorporated. I was the first person to adopt the use of the term pagan to describe us and myself and my
And
religion.
you sat on the 1973 Witches Council. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I was right there as we formulated the 13 principles of Wiccan belief and many other councils. I was a co founder of the first pagan ecumenical councils, and I've been involved in all of this stuff for my whole life. So I know everybody, and have published Green
Yeah.
Egg magazine, the longest running magical publication ever published, for 56 years. You know, it's still
Hmm.
going strong. It's online these days, but in the process of that, I know everybody. I know all the teachers and the leaders and the elders in the pagan community.
Right.
Um, I've lost a lot of them. Many of my contemporaries have died over the years, but I'm still here, still
Yeah.
going strong.
So,
And so I reached out to these people. I have a
right.
network. I have mailing lists and stuff. And I reached out and I said, what we need to do is come together here. You know, we've
Yes.
all been developing our separate independent ways, our different groups, our different groves, our different covens, our different traditions, and that's all good. We all needed to do that because we thrive on diversity. But now is the time to rally the troops.
Hmm.
Avengers assemble. We need to come together here. And so we
Yeah.
are. We've now formed an association we call Pagan Solidarity. We've just
Hmm.
started a website. We've been having weekly Zoom meetings that have grown from an initial 36 people at the first meeting. Starhawk set up the early Zoom meetings and has continued to do that. Many of the pagan leaders are involved in now in heading up committees and writing documents and really preparing to
When you
take
said
this in a big.
Starhawk, is that Starhawk is the author of the Spiral Dance? That Starhawk?
Starhawk. I don't think there's another one, is there? The only one I know is her. But
There's a
yes,
yeah, there's a few. There's a few.
it,
Um,
well,
so
that's
the
the one.
original Starhawk, that's really cool.
The
So
original, the original Starhawk. Yes,
so that's really cool.
and
So
many of them.
so it's definitely an honor to have you on as someone that's been walking with the pagan community since basically its revival and inception. Because that's exactly what this is a revival, and now it's kind of all of this political shifting, and there's a lot of people, there's a lot of pagan people, there's a lot of magic folks, Wiccan communities that are scared of the political shifting, and they're outraged, and it's just like it's become a thing where now they just hate particular people in politics. And I'm not so sure that hate is probably the answer, but like I'm no one special. I'm not like the greatest mind in the world, but a lot of us are kind of like, well, what do we do? Like, what can we do? I mean, we can do online resistance. Um, I would love to see people in our community perhaps go into politics. I mean, Mr. Zell, who in our community is into politics? Do we have any like mayors? Do we have any people that are in like politics? Because I know some of the most people in the community that I talk to are like have PhDs or like really smart. When comes the time that we come into politics, and should we even entertain that to go into politics?
Well, I think, as reluctant as many of us are to get involved in that, it's a messy thing and we don't really want to do it. And we're not interested in power, so we just haven't done much of that. But a few groups have mostly dealt with legal issues like Circle, for example, Circle Network that Selena Fox runs. She's also part of this Pagan Solidarity Coalition that we've been developing. They have the Lady Liberty League, and they fought many legal cases and have won every one of them, every single one, on the basis of constitutional rights and such like that. So they were the ones who got the rights for uh, veterans to have pentagrams on their headstones in Arlington
Yeah,
Cemetery, for example. We've got
Virginia.
the
Yeah, I like that.
exactly. We have the Aquarian Tabernacle Church in Washington, and they've been
Yeah,
involved in local politics pretty effectively. Right
yeah,
here
that's true.
in Asheville, North Carolina, Rhiannon and I have been involved as much as we can. We were poll workers for the election, and we are now associated with a growing group called Indivisible that is having town hall meetings that are broad based, and lots of people are turning out. We went to one just this week that had about 300 people or so showed up for that. And we volunteered for some of the committees that are doing networking and drafting documents. There are many, many legal cases. We have attorneys that are working on some of these. But a good part of, I think, our effort now has got to be to reach out, not just within our own community, but to the friendly neighboring communities, being good neighbors in our neighborhoods. For example, here in Asheville, there was a devastating effects of Hurricane Helene. The whole main downtown of Asheville was flooded and destroyed. Whole neighborhoods were just simply wiped away. It was devastating. And many of the local pagans, including ourselves, my lovely lady Rhiannon and I, were down there helping people salvage what they could out of the wreckage and the mud from the floods. So getting involved locally is a very good thing to do as pagans. Wear your pentagrams, and when you can. Now there's some people who really can't even do that, but this is a red state. But Asheville is a kind of a blue island in the middle of the red state of North Carolina. But we do reach out. We have to. We have to become friends with people. We have to make friendly contact wherever we go and find common ground with ordinary people, because I don't think ordinary people support this. Again, remember that Trump and his minions were only elected by less than a third of the voting populace. 2/3 of the electorate did not vote for this guy. and they are our potential friends and allies. So we're the situation of all these stories involving an evil empire and a rebel alliance. This is like something out of Star Wars or Robin Hood or any of the other many stories that we have had about this kind of a situation. And that's probably the best thing that we
Mr.
can
Zell,
do
there's
is
a question. Mr. Zell, there's a question in the chat room by a priestess, and
okay.
she goes on this. She asks, Oberon Zell, do you believe that we will see a revocation of the right to religious freedom in the U.S., and if so, do you think we can fit it successfully?
Well, I think there will be efforts to overturn the Constitution itself, and especially the First Amendment, which provides, to quote exactly, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Mhm.
Trump has recently established the White House faith office that is all about promoting religion, but all the language is very generic. It talks about, religious freedom and the rights of churches to do what they want to do. Well, of course, they're only thinking of Christian churches, but at least until they repeal the First Amendment, which I don't think will be possible, that would require a 2/3 majority in Congress, and they're not going to get that because the Congress is very narrowly divided. In the Senate, it's only like 3 votes difference between that. The Republicans have only an edge of 3 votes, and they're not going to get a 2/3 majority. So they're not going to be able to do these things that they really want to do. They're doing everything they can do, but they can't do all of it. But I think they will make every effort to try to repeal our rights. They've already pretty much knocked out the transgender community by simply declaring that there is no such thing as
Right.
transgender. They're not allowed
Yeah.
to exist, and they will continue doing that kind of stuff. They're going to working their way down. First, they came for the immigrants. This is evoking an old statement that was famously made um, by by a Christian minister in 1945 who had survived the Holocaust, and he said first they came for the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. And then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. And then they came for me. And by that time, there was nobody left to speak up. And we're looking at that right now. But we have an advantage. In the previous times that things like this have happened, nobody saw it coming. And in this case, we've seen it coming. We've been watching this emerge for years and years and years, and we're now seeing it emerge full blast, and we are in a position to address it. And the best way we can do is to reach out and form common cause, form alliances, join groups, join Indivisible, get involved with that. Join your local soup kitchens and go work at your senior centers and go read children's books in the library and do everything you can to be involved in your community. In my own background, for example, I lived for a long time in a town in California called Ukiah when we were
Uh-huh.
raising unicorns, and we opened up our little storefront business for the green egg. We had our printing press there, and we did printing for everybody in the town. And I joined the Chamber of Commerce, and I did commercial art for all the local businesses before everybody had desktop computers. I had them, and I was doing that. I was making menus for the restaurants and brochures for New Age retreat centers and everything. I did the billboard that was on the highway. Welcome to Ukiah, big billboard. I did that. And by being involved in our local communities and being visible and doing so as pagans, you know, we can strengthen our place and our role in the society. Because for too long we've been hidden. And we've had to because we were being persecuted. But now our numbers are really strong. The estimates are that there's several million of us in America alone. And that's really all
Yep.
we can address right now. Throughout the world, paganism is growing and taking off. But right here in America, in the United States, we have several million people. And if we can get involved locally with our neighbors, with our potential friends, make friends, talk to people, sit down and talk to people. Everybody wants to talk. People are hurting. And they're going to hurt even more as Trump's policies take effect, as you see the effects of grocery prices going sky high because they deported all the farm workers and put tariffs on imports from Mexico and other places. Everything is going to go completely fall apart. So, other people are going to want to talk about this stuff. So there you go. That's some of the stuff we can do.
Somebody in the chat room had said that there is somebody in politics. Kara Scholes is a politician. I'm not really sure about that. That's kind of intriguing. Kind of check that out.
Okay.
And you mentioned a organization or a website that's up that has to do with kind of unifying and that kind of slant. What was the name of that group or website again?
Well, the one that we're doing for our own group, we just started the website, so it really only has a few things, but you can go there and check it out. It's called Pagan Solidarity .us. That's it. And then there is Indivisible, which is a really good one to get involved with, and that will tell you what's going on everywhere, local things that are happening. And those are two places you can go. As the Pagan Solidarity will grow, each Monday we have another Zoom meeting, and we now set out the invitations for tomorrow to about 300 people on our list of pagan leaders and people who signed our petitions and people we know. And it's going to keep on growing. And as it does, we will develop more resources. Right now, we're just beginning, but it will grow. In any case, though, Indivisible has been going on for a little while, and I highly recommend getting involved with that one. It's easy. In your community, they will have town hall meetings, find out about them, and attend and volunteer to be on a committee. That's how you get involved with these things, is just volunteer to be on a committee, and you're in.
Yeah, I like the idea of the petitions. I'm definitely going to look into that. If there's ongoing petitions, I'd love to be able to utilize our small platform, Witchcraft TV, to let folks know, because there's, like I was saying, Mr. Zell, there's a lot of pagans and practitioners of various groups and orgs and traditions that just are kind of, what do we do? Like, this is horrible, and I just see like. And what really gets me, Mr. Zell, and I want to talk about this too, and kind of pick your brain on this, is that I work in the landscape of modern pagan media, modern witchcraft media, magic media, with the wisest people that I can find. And what I've noticed is that all around the country, and even across the pond, there's like infighting that happens between different groups and organizations and families or whatever might have you. And I see all this infighting, and I'm just kind of like, there's a bigger picture here, particularly with the political shifts, where it's possible that the trajectory is they're about to try to suffocate the freedom of choice and spirituality. And at the end of the day, Mr. Zell, it's very personal to me, because this particular community and the ideology of what is the contemporary revival, it helped me survive. I would be not okay without it. I would be in a jail cell. So to me, it's personal, and that's part of the reason why I want to give back. And I agree with you. We need to unite. People really need to stop with the infighting. It's too much of a, I want to be the top dog of this and that, or whatever you do. But I feel like if we all did work together, how much more change could we really do together? If the entire community, and see, 50, 60 years ago, when you first launched like the Green Egg and everything, the circles were a lot smaller. Everybody kind of knew each other. It's like now, like you said, there's so many people that are involved in the movement. There's no central hub. They're kind of scattered everywhere. So it's just kind of like, I don't know. And the infrastructure was never organized, because we're kind of paganism and witchcraft is kind of unorganized. Is that true?
Well, yeah, people talk about how they don't like organized religion, and I always say, well, then you're in good place because we are definitely not that. We are disorganized religion,
Right.
if ever there was any. But that has
Right.
been our strength. It's how we've been able to grow, and how we've been able to do it is autonomous, independent things. But we used to have common watering holes. Green Egg was one of those back in the earlier days when we were having a print magazine that you could buy in bookstores when there were still bookstores before Amazon took over. Everybody read Green Egg. If you wanted somebody
Yep.
to know what you had to say, you could write a letter to Green Egg, and or if you had a good idea, you could write an article and be published in Green Egg, and everybody read Green Egg. But there were only a few thousand of us then. I think
Right.
that our maximum circulation as a print magazine was about 13,000. And but then at the end of the century, the whole print thing blew up. The distributors kind of screwed everybody, all the small publications, and the bookstores started closing up. And we survived by going online, becoming an e-zine. So Green Egg for the last 20 some years has now been an email magazine, but that doesn't compete with the countless websites and the countless Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and all the other places now where people go to communicate with each other and get information. There is no central watering hole that everybody goes to, and that's difficult. But I think that what we're doing now by reaching out to all the pagan leaders who have their groups and who have the traditions, and reaching out to their people, we're creating a new kind of network that hasn't really existed before that can permeate the community so everybody will be tuned in. And information that we are developing and sharing on the Pagan Solidarity website will be circulated. And we'll be having calendars and schedules of events and just all kinds of things that people can come together. Because ultimately, that is our best way to survive. It's the Rebel Alliance thing. It was the fundamental plot, not just of Star Wars, but Mufasa and Flash Gordon and Robin Hood and many other stories in which a tyrannical, oppressive empire eventually was defeated by the people themselves coming together and forming a rebel alliance. And we really have to be that now. It's our time. But we've been gaining our strength in all these independent little things. It's like having, growing up in a family that you're fairly small, but if you've got a good family and they raise you right, when you're ready to go out into the world, you know what to do and you can reach out to other people. And that's what our difference has done for us, all these different groups. And no, we don't have any central authority. We don't have any king. We don't have any emperor. We have lots and lots of small scale priests and priestesses serving their own little communities. But that is really also our strength because there's nobody that can be taken out. There's no single individual that if they were, assassinated, which is something Isaac Bonowitz always feared, then that would destroy the community. That can't happen. So
Right.
that's a great strength for us.
Mhm. I actually never looked at it that way. That's pretty cool. That's very cool. Very cool. So yeah, just to unify different sects or leaders within the community. I mean, that's kind of a hard thing to do because people in the community in some faction are still infighting about something that happened 30, 40 years ago for
Oh yeah,
small
and they
things.
will. They will. There will be family quarrels that go on besides behind the scenes, but there's a concept in traditional families that says, well, the families can fight within themselves, but they don't do it in public, And we're going to have that because we're very independent people and we can be very cranky and we all think that we know what's right and all that stuff. We have to have a greater cause. Interestingly enough, think of all the science fiction movies that have been made involving an alien invasion that brings all of humanity together to resist, like
Right.
Independence Day is a good example, for
Yep.
instance. And interestingly enough, Ronald Reagan, when he was president and having his talks with Gorbachev, which ended the Cold War and brought down the Berlin Wall and all that stuff. Now, I'm not a real fan of Reagan on many things, but he had been in the movies. And he had a little insight there. And he told Gorbachev that he felt that the only thing that could really unite humanity would probably be an alien invasion. Well, this is what we're dealing with here. We have a common enemy now. We really do have an alien invasion, someone that is not on our side, does not have our interests, is hostile to the earth itself, you know, opposes, doesn't believe in climate change, opposes green energy and green solutions to things, is only interested in their own personal enrichment. Well, that doesn't benefit anybody else, so there's no reason why anybody else should support that. And once the people have been duped into supporting these guys, figure out they've been had, I think there can be a tremendous backlash. And we can help to feed that. We can feed into that by providing real information and meeting with people in town halls, getting in local conversations. After the incredible debacle that happened Saturday in the White House with Trump and Vance just attacking Zelensky in his vicious bullying fashion that was just devastating as we witnessed it. Well, my wife Rhiannon is a nurse, and she works in a hospital where she's actually a psychiatric nurse, so she's a good match for me. I like to say. Um, and they never talked about politics there, but uh, but suddenly after that whole thing that blew up, they were talking politics. Everybody was talking because everybody was appalled by what happened there, and suddenly everybody realizes they're on the same side. They all felt the same way. They all, nobody could support that. Nobody could support those actions, and this is happening everywhere. It really is. So find ways to get involved. Go to town hall meetings, whatever they are. Raise your voice. Again, join Indivisible. That's the best thing going right now on the political frame because it involves everybody. And within the pagan community, pagan festivals and pagan pride events in particular, I think are going to be very good venues for communication. I'm recommending to all the national pagan pride organizations, for example, to invite some of the friendly local churches to come and put up a booth and provide information and maybe be on a panel where we can talk about this stuff and start having these kind of events because our pagan pride kind of stuff is a public event that everybody can come to and people do. And if they can come and see good people and have good conversations and get some good information, this will spread and grow because what we are doing here, we are on the side of life, and light and life will drive away the darkness ultimately. And no tyrannical empire has ever survived. They may go on for a while. I mean, the Roman Empire lasted for several hundred years, but ultimately they all succumb to the will of the people who rise. And ultimately, that's it. This is what Abraham Lincoln talked about when he invoked the government by the people and of the people and for the people. And we have to respond to that. I made T-shirts that I wear around at these things that simply are a print of the preamble to the United States Conversation, to the United States Constitution, and it's basically in big letters, "We the people," and then goes
Right.
on to print the rest of it on the background of an American flag. We have to declare that we are Americans, that these values that we hold of a country of immigrants that cherishes diversity and has a place for everybody, and welcoming to everybody. We have to promote that as the American dream, which it is. That's the foundation of it. Uh, we make regular trips, my family here, to Williamsburg, Virginia, where they have a reconstruction of the colonial era town of Williamsburg, where the revolution began, really. And they have actors portraying people like Washington and Jefferson, and they give these amazing talks about what it all meant back in those days to create a revolution again and overthrow a tyrannical king. Well, we're back in those conversations.
Somebody in the chat room said the backlash is beginning, that Trump and Vance bullying Zelensky was horrible.
Exactly, exactly. And it will because they don't know how to do anything else. That's what they do. They are bullies. They're mean spirited. They're stupid, and they have been getting rid of all the people with any competence and integrity in all these different posts. They've been firing people right and left and appointing idiots, people who are totally corrupt, idiots, criminals, drunks, sex abusers. These are the people they're putting into position. They don't know how to govern. They have no idea how to govern. All they know how to do is bully people and make money to line their own pockets. They don't do anything to serve at all. And that's the difference. Our entire religion, paganism, witchcraft, is all about service. That's what we do. We are a whole community of service, as are many good Christian churches and organizations, and much of the contemporary Jewish movement is all about service. I worked for years with the Human Development Corporation out of St. Louis, and most of the higher up organizers were all Jewish. So they've come around completely from the old monotheistic domination of the Old Testament to to being in the forefront of rights and freedoms and things like the ACLU. Join the ACLU. We join the ACLU. We send them money to be a part of that. There's the Americans for Separation of Church and State, Americans United for Religious Freedom. There's the Atheist Society. There are organizations like that that are really working for the same things that we're working from. They just don't identify themselves as pagans. But these are friendly neighboring people. This is like the United Federation of Planets, gradually growing to basically be able to embrace Vulcans and Klingons and Ferengi and Cardassians. You just have to keep expanding the alliance. And that's our best strength. This is what we've been doing. This is why we are the oldest religion. We go back thousands and thousands of years because of the nature of our valuing of diversity and plurality and polytheism. We are able to be inclusive. We are the most inclusive religion on earth. Everybody's welcome. We don't care about what you believe or your sexual orientation or who you want to sleep with. And we don't care about that stuff. We care that you care, that you want to serve, that you want to work together, you want to be together, and that's what we can do. These are our strengths. We should play to them. I've often been referred to as a cat herder because I'm really good at that, apparently, about herding cats. But I always remind people what a herd of cats is called. And a herd of cats is called a pride. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I like that. Beautifully spoken. And I kind of want to add to that, Mr. Zell, that if you go out like in the woods and you find one stick, you can kind of break it pretty easily. But if you put about 6 or 7 of those sticks together, it becomes a little bit harder to break. So I think, coming together like that does make us stronger. And I want nothing more but to better unite the entire community and really stop all this infighting. And like I was saying, I see a lot of it working with media, and with the political shifts and everything. I know that things are safer in particular political arenas. The revival itself is safer in different political arenas, and I never really got too political, and I'm not so sure that I should, but I definitely want to have fair representation of the community to always have a voice on Witchcraft TV, so they can be the voice of what should be spoken or said. And to have your voice on here is just a beautiful endeavor, and I appreciate you coming on, Mr. Zell.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I think that is what we all to be needing to do. That's what I've done with Green Egg for 56 years, is have a place where everybody can have a voice. And you're providing the same thing. It's a platform. It's a fulcrum, Archimedes famously said, he was one of the great inventors of ancient Greece, the Leonardo da Vinci of his time. He said, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum and a place to stand, and I will move the world. And we have that. We can develop that with our community. Our communications networks like your show and Green Egg are the levers that can reach out across the miles and across the cultures to reach people. And the fulcrum where we stand is our community itself. And that's what we can use. All we really have to do is just come together in a spirit of that are the things that unite us are greater and stronger than the things that divide us. And it's okay to have things that divide us. It's okay to have arguments and debates and conflicts. Some of them can get pretty heated, And sometimes people will say, I can't work with you anymore. But nonetheless, we have to recognize that we have common cause that is greater than anything, because we have a common enemy that will destroy all of us. When in signing the Declaration of Independence, Benjamin Franklin, who was one of our greatest philosophers and teachers and wizards of the time, said, we must all hang together, or surely we will all hang separately. And that's where we stand right now.
When we first started the show, Mr. Zell, I said something to the effect that everything has two opposing forces, and then you had said something to the effect that everything casts a shadow. Or can you elaborate on that one more time? I'd love to revisit that before we close out.
So that what I said was, the greater the light, the darker the shadow. And one of the things that I've talked about a lot, not on this show yet, but I would, is the 60-year cultural renaissance cycle. And every 60 years, like clockwork, there has been a major cultural renaissance in which all kinds of movements are started and begin, and things that shape the next decades. The first one was the Italian Renaissance of the 1480s, and all the innovations and revolutions that began there with people like Leonardo da Vinci and all the great artists and philosophers of that time. They changed the world. And 60 years later was the age of discovery, in which people sailing around the world brought back cultural stuff from everywhere. And then we had 60 years later from that was the English Renaissance, that Queen Elizabeth and Shakespeare and Bacon and all that. 60 years after that was the scientific revolution in the 1660s. And that was the, Galileo and Newton and all that came about. The 1720s was the Great Awakening, that was very influential. A young American named Ben Franklin happened to have been over in Europe at the time this was going on, and he brought back all kinds of ideas that fueled the French and American revolutions of the 1780s, the next time period. The next period was the 1840s, the Transcendentalist Awakening with Whitman and Thoreau, and an incredible revival of paganism, which happens in all of these. You get the cultural aspects of revival of paganism and the goddess in art and poetry and everywhere. The next one was the turn of the century, they call the Golden Dawn, the beginning of the age of magic. The next one was the 1960s, the psychedelic revolution. And now in the 2020s, we are in the middle of another one. And each of these has had a shadow. The initial Italian Renaissance had the shadow of the Spanish Inquisition that was happening at the same time. The Age of Discovery also was the brutal religious wars of the Reformation period. And it's so on and so on it goes. Each of these has had their time. The 1840s had the slavery, and eventually the Civil War came out of that. And the 1960s had the Vietnam War as its shadow. And right now we began this decade with the COVID epidemic, and we are now in the middle of this incredible new administration. But out of these shit piles, is a fertilization of a whole new culture that emerges, because people just get pushed down so far that the rebound is tremendous and incredibly influential. And we are at that kind of a place. But more than any previous time, we are aware of that, aware of where we stand, and we can make conscious choices about what kind of a future we want to create.
Beautifully spoken. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope to have you back on again. And for our viewers, make sure you check out Indivisibility is the website. I'm going to try to pull that information from you, Mr. Zell, and put it on the platforms later on this evening. And make sure y'all keep it right here on www.witchcrafttv.online. We are fair representation for all pagan, witch, and magic paths. Thank you, Mr. Zell, and blessed it be.
Blessed be.